today. Are we going to hit the, all right on cue. Perfect. Okay, well, welcome everybody. My name is Tony Johnson. Maybe we could have all the attendees. I'm not sure if you guys did this yet, but if you could just enter your location into the chat feature right now, that'll give me a little better idea of where people are calling in from. We've got folks from all over the state, I'm sure, and a large number of people. So I am in Fond du Lac County. I am a forestry outreach specialist for the UW-Madison Division of Extension. I've got half an hour today to talk to you about forest management and water quality. I'm going to be kind of focusing on practices beyond the field edge. So there is a lot to get through. I just mentioned, this is my first time giving this chat, so I'd really like any kind of feedback or comments in the chat as well. If there's something that I'm saying that seems off base or not right, you can let me have it. So the spirit of today's talk is kind of with the idea that there's a lot of great work happening across the state promoting in-field and edge of field soil health and water quality practices. And I wanted to just give a couple of slides here today to consider some of the issues and opportunities to improve water quality in woodlands beyond the field edge. So I'm going to frame some of the ways that woods impact water quality, outline some of the practices and considerations and resources for water quality in folks' woods. And again, we've only got 30 minutes here, so I want to hear from you in the chat. So maybe in addition, one question I had is how many folks in the audience work with woodland owners who are not farmers? I was kind of under the assumption that most of the woodland owners that our county colleagues are working with are farmers, but if there are folks who work a lot with woodland owners who are not farmers, we could just enter that in the chat. I'd be curious if there are any regional trends that pop out there. But with that said, we will jump right into the presentation. So Kristen, could you pull up poll number 1, and I'll just introduce myself a little bit here. The first poll is just getting at where you work, and so I can get a little better idea of who I'm chatting with today. But basically, I am a regional outreach specialist. I'm in a program that's got a forestry and a watershed focus. So it's called the Natural Resources Education Program, but we've got educators around the state working on forestry and watershed related issues. A lot of my watershed colleagues work on producer-led watershed networks and demo farm networks. And you can see the names of the folks on the right-hand side of your screen there. The highlighted folks are the forestry educators. So again, my name is Tony Johnson. I'm out of UW-Fond du Lac, but I cover the southern part of the state for the program. And then I've got colleagues in the Northwest, Lauren Larson, and in the Northeast or North, Bill Clace. So those are just some people I wanted to point your attention to. If you've got any questions, we are a resource for you guys related to forestry issues. So I do statewide programming for farm woods forestry. And one of the outcomes that I'm looking for today is to connect you all with us as a resource for answering forestry questions. And I've got business cards and other information that can be available, but I'd like to, keep this communication going with folks who want to continue the dialogue. Could we just take a look at the poll results quick while we transfer to the next slide? All right, so yeah, large majority are county, then some state and federal. Okay, great. So a brief overview of the forest ownership in Wisconsin. So statewide, there's 16 million acres of forest in Wisconsin that has been trending upward in the last several decades. So we're getting some reforestation of previously cleared areas in, primarily non-agricultural areas, but just kind of notice there's a trend there that there's more forest in Wisconsin than there used to be. About 10.5 million acres are owned by private landowners. So on the map here, we've got the color-coded land ownership, and you can see all of the very lightest green. That's the private landowners, and in those areas that look more white, you're seeing those landscapes that have very small chunks of woods, and then it's kind of a patchwork across the state. So you can see we've got forest landowners all across the state. In 2017, there was a NEFA survey showing that 2.3 million of the acres in Wisconsin, 2.3 million acres of the woods were on farms. So that's about 20% of the total acreage, but then that was only on 35,000 farms. So kind of the idea there is that the average farm woodland owner has twice the wooded acreage as the non-ag woodland owner. And then also that survey showed that about a little under 500,000 acres of the woods that farmers reported were pastured. And there's been some changes in farm woods as well. So from 2012 to 2017, there was a loss of almost 250,000 acres of farm woods in Wisconsin. And a lot of that's happening due to ownership transfers and parcelization. But kind of why I'm working on forestry outreach for farmers is basically because there's such a large land base of forests in Wisconsin, and farmer woodland owners who manage those acres, and the forested acres have a huge impact on watersheds statewide. So degraded forests are less valuable for the landowners, and they're they deteriorates water quality. So there's a lot of opportunities to improve forest health and water quality, and farmers, are a somewhat different audience than non-farming landowners because of the tax incentives that are associated with ag woods as well as ag use rates and taxes, and it kind of makes the MFL program a little less valuable to some of these landowners. So with that in mind, we identified farmer woodland owners as an audience that were unique enough to tailor an outreach strategy specifically to reach them. So maybe we could just launch the next poll as we start this next slide. So, right, so this is a caricature, but historically, farm forestry was kind of farmer or foresters saying to farmers, keep your cows out of the woods, right? I'm curious how many people on the call today have heard from farmers when they're talking about their woods primarily as a tax burden. Maybe they're saying, what's the value in that woods? All I get is a tax bill. But one of the things I wanted to talk about is that forests offer a lot of value to farmsteads, and they're critical to things that farmers care about, including soil and water health. So we'll talk a little bit in the next slide about some of the other values that forests provide to woodlands, but kind of the second critical thing I'm trying to do today is to expand on the connection between forester and ag professionals to better serve farmer woodland owners. And a big part of that is helping to promote the values that woodlands provide to farmers. And I think water quality, kind of the basis of the talk today, is a really solid foundation to get the message out about the importance of managing woodlands. Okay, so with this slide, if we could just remember back to 2 slides when we were looking at the forest ownership of Wisconsin, and then take that map in the middle and overlay the surface water map from the middle of the screen, you can kind of see the overlap here. Basically, every county in the state has forested land and surface waters that intersect, and that's going to be a really critical point where we can implement some practices to improve water quality. So we'll just keep that connection in mind, but we'll talk a little bit more about water quality on the next slide. But some of the other values that woods provide, that are outside of the tax bill that farmers are seeing, are not always considered. And some of those things are the economic opportunities. The timber industry is really important in the state of Wisconsin, supporting jobs related to forestry, logging, wood products, construction. And so there's economic opportunities within the forest as far as timber, but then also non-timber products, which we'll talk a little bit about later. Woods are really important for wildlife habitat, and I think that's something that farmers do value, but may not always have top of mind. They're important sources of food and shelter for birds, animals, and insects. And then you locate them next to lakes and streams, and they can help support the aquatic life by providing shade and structure in the form of branches and clean water. Many landowners can strategically manage their trees to enhance wildlife and recreational opportunities, but it's often not a part of the kind of broader management plan. And with the picture of the bottom left here is of one of my colleagues hunting, and I think that's one thing that gets discounted in woodlands is kind of the intergenerational recreational opportunities that are really important to farmer landowners or farmer woodland owners. And then kind of the last piece here of some of those benefits that woodlands provide are around soil health, right? So woods anchor topsoil, add structure, contribute nutrients and organic matter. And as we talk about soil health and think about the impacts that has on water quality, kind of the framework that I'll keep coming back to is around the soil health principles and just extending that beyond the field and into your woods. So we're thinking about the soil armor, minimizing soil disturbance, the plant diversity, having a continual living plant or root in the woods. We're not going to talk so much about livestock in the woods today, but that's another conversation we can have in the future. But basically, healthy soil is closely related to clean water, and a well-managed forest system is generally good for soil health. All right, so to jump back to the woods and the water quality, maybe we can just add one more question here in the chat in relation to soil and water issues that folks are seeing in farmers' woods. So we've got a couple images up here of some stream erosion and some flooding, and just curious what people are seeing as major water quality issues in the woods. So you can just enter that in the chat. Maybe we can get to that at the end. But basically, forests are essential for clean water. The trees help regulate the rates of erosion, sedimentation, flooding by intercepting, absorbing, and slowing the flow of precipitation. They're also a natural filter, pulling pollution from the air and water and soil before it reaches lakes, rivers, and groundwaters. In the bottom left here, we got a picture of a floodplain forest, which is a really important habitat for intercepting water, slowing the flow, allowing sediment to settle, promoting infiltration of that water, and holding water in the watershed to reduce those flow rates downstream. And then we've got a couple pictures here of some erosion that is either going on the field edge, in which buffers are really effective and important tool for filtering. But when we're looking beyond the field edge and looking in the forest itself, there's a number of different best management practices for water quality that we'll talk about on future slide around trail management, timber harvest, forest health. But the basic idea again is following those soil health principles of your roots holding the soil in place, having multi-tier diverse structure to reduce erosion, and then protecting that forest floor from sheet rill and gully erosion. But first, the first practice we're going to dive into is field edge riparian buffer practice. In my mind, this is kind of a no-brainer, right? When you think about surface water quality, buffer is just an obvious solution. And looking at kind of the infographics I've got up here, depending on what your the benefits that you're looking at, that buffer can look a bunch of different ways. So whether that's a forested buffer that's going to be providing wildlife habitat, or primarily a filter buffer that's you're really focusing on the root mass and the living plant tissue to help slow down water as it's passing from that field edge to the surface water. But I'm curious from the folks' perspective in the audience what the current state of adoption of buffers are in your area. Whether that's forested or not. Are the landowners that people in the audience are working with, are they seeing value in buffers and protecting those as important parts of their landscape, or is that seen as another kind of form of wasted space? And in my perspective, I think there's been a lot of momentum around soil and water conservation on the field edge, and it seems like this idea of buffering surface waters is kind of obvious and no-brainer. And I think I'd be curious if there are certain limitations to getting these practices on the landscape, or certain things that are happening that are causing folks to remove them. But when I'm looking at buffers, I'm kind of interested in some of these additional opportunities that folks have. So your forested buffer, right? You're protecting the banks and the wetlands, filtering and slowing the water. However, there's more than just water quality benefits that we can get from these spaces. I'm particularly excited about economic opportunities like specialty crops, whether that's harvesting perennial grasses, or non-timber forest products that can help justify that space beyond just the value that it has for water quality. And then if there's anybody in the audience that is seeing or has familiarity with additional uses of buffers, I'd be really curious to hear about that in the chat, right? Because when we're talking about buffers, the water quality is the essential piece. And I think that there is momentum and energy there, but there's a lot we can do for water quality by simply promoting buffers. But I think there are opportunities that exist in those zones beyond just the water quality benefits. So, think about these buffers as managing another crop, whether that's for, non-timber forest products, or even if you're, not interested in pursuing some of these additional opportunities, maybe that's leasing the space to someone who is. So I think there's some access opportunities there for alternative crops.
Tony,
In addition, yeah, go ahead.
I did notice there was a few questions in the chat, and you'd mentioned earlier on possibly taking questions. Do you want those now or at the end?
Yeah, now's a good time. I'll just wrap up this slide, and we can you can bring up the questions when we start the next one. So
Okay.
kind of the other things that I'm looking at here are some of the other opportunities are pollinator support, carbon sequestration. Again, that family and recreation piece I think is a really important value that is often not brought up in some of the decision-making processes. And then, when we're thinking about these other opportunities, it's just important to remember the role that the farm economy has on woodland engagement. It seems like, when there are economic challenges, there is more opportunity for some of this diversification and, different opportunities. So I'll take some of those questions now, Kyle.
Tony, the first one I think is from Kurt. It says, what is the definition of a degraded woodland? Can an area which was once hardwood trees, then clear cut or cleared maybe for cropping, then planted to pines, which are 20 to 30 years old, be considered degraded woodland as well?
Yeah, that's a really, really tough question to answer from my computer chair. But I think a lot of, when we're talking about a degraded woodland, it's referring to some of those ecosystem services that woods provide. So some of the soil retention and water filtering and holding benefits that they provide, or else, they could be degraded in terms of their timber production capacity. So we'll talk a little bit more about degraded woodlands and the impact on water quality in the next one. But I think that's a really important piece that I kind of wanted to feature in this talk today. So in kind of framing that degraded woodland piece and the impact on water quality, I just wanted to point everybody to this document, the DNR Forestry Water Quality Bible, the best management practices for water quality. I can share a link to this document as well, but this is basically a PDF that exists online, or else there's a hard copy in most DNR field offices of where you can look for specific best management practices in your woodland. So that's practices around creating forestry management plans, where to go for permits, the different programs that are available, road construction and maintenance, stream crossing, wetlands, timber harvest, burning, wildfire. So this is basically the how to protect your water quality for all the different practices that you may be interested in pursuing in your forest. But one topic that I wanted to expand on that kind of relates to the last question is around forest health. And I think it's kind of underemphasized when we're talking about water quality, and it's about protecting the forest floor. So this is just one aspect of forest health, but I think it's kind of illustrative of some of the challenges with forestry outreach and then some of the opportunities. So as I mentioned, buffers are the primary field edge water quality practices that we're trying to promote. We've got forestry best management practices for the different practices within the forest. But what we're looking at here is a case of woodland management and the impact on water quality. And just looking at these four pictures, the bottom two are of the same woods, just different time scale, and then the top two are two different woods. But I mean, what do you guys see here? Top left, we've got a deer exclosure, where you can see the different regeneration inside and outside of the exclosure. That's the top left. The top right, you've got the allelopathic invasive plants. Those are all the garlic mustard, and you can see it's kind of a monoculture on the forest floor. And then on the bottom here, the temporal difference, you've got the before jumping worms arrived and after jumping worms arrived, which is causing just a major change in the makeup of the forest floor. Right, so getting back to the forestry best management practices and how it relates to forest health. So one of those practices is around protecting the forest floor, right? So thinking back to our soil health principles of armoring the soil, promoting plant diversity, living roots year round, and limiting disturbance. What impacts are you seeing here, right? So the deer, the worms, the garlic mustard, they're all reducing the armor and the diversity of the forest floor. They're increasing the likelihood of soil exposure and also the potential of erosion on the forest floor. So to reduce the erosion susceptibility and improve the forest water quality, you got to improve the health of the forest understory in these situations. So, thinking about these in terms of, degraded forests, your water quality best management practices here are going to be forest health practices, right? You're going to be looking at controlling deer, limiting the spread of invasive species, using integrated strategies to control those invasive species. Maybe your water quality best management practice here for deer includes increasing your hunting or doing some exclosures in sensitive areas. Your invasive species best management practices for water quality could oftentimes are around promoting native species that live in forest understories. So to promote those invasives, you might need to increase light on the forest floor, like by doing a selective cut or a crop tree release. And kind of the point I'm trying to make here is that forest management is extremely context specific, and you're working on long time scales, which can make it challenging. And kind of the point that I want to make here is that farmers are using professionals in their business operations all the time, whether that's with tax help or getting information on new seeds. And I think based on the complexity that we're seeing in some of these forest health issues, it's a really good idea to get site-specific recommendations from a professional. And in this case, it's a forester. So here we'll launch the DNR poll, which is the last poll for today. But basically, I do a lot of work in my role with Extension Forestry to help the Division of Forestry connect with private landowners. And particularly with some of my recent initiatives is working to connect the Division of Forestry with farmer forest owners. So the DNR Forestry Division is a non-regulatory program. So the service foresters are a free service for landowners. Basically, you go to this link here, dnrwi.gov/FAL, which stands for Forestry Assistance Locator, and you can find the service forester for your county. And that person is basically there to help private landowners in your county with forestry related issues. So they make free property visits and can help with some of those site specific recommendations around forest health considerations or answering some of those economic questions. But yeah, I bring this slide up just basically to reinforce the fact that there's opportunities to connect our forestry outreach folks, the people who work in the woods and work for private landowners with the folks who work in the farm field and work for private landowners, because we all have this mutual interest of working for landowners to help them with their conservation goals, as well as other economic and social interests. So again, just understand that these people are available to help. There are two primary types of DNR foresters, the tax law foresters and the service foresters, and they all kind of serve a different role. So, I just wanted to make everybody aware of those services. And then the DNR also has financial assistance for landowners. So there's a grant program. I noticed there was quite a few NRCS employees. So the Wiffle Gap program is a analogous program to EQIP, but just kind of has a little bit different structure and timeline. So it might be something to point landowners to if EQIP doesn't work out, or there's certain situations that don't align perfectly. And then I also just like to make a point that they do tree sales as well with the DNR. So it's a great place to go to source for some of the tree planting for programs that are going on. All right, so question 3 from, do you know the service forester in your county? So that's great. I'm seeing the results roll in. Maybe we can just end the poll and share it now. It looks like most of the people do. So that's awesome. That's one of the key takeaways that I wanted folks to get from today, is that, even if you're not a forestry expert, there are people in the state to help and answer those questions. So you don't have to feel like you're, coming up with the stuff on your own. Okay. So wrapping up, we've just got a couple minutes left here. I'm relatively new in my role in Extension, and I really appreciate the opportunity from Land+Water to come and talk with you all about this. And I'm really interested in exploring some more integrated forestry programming for farmers. And I think a lot of that is going to be piggybacking forestry topics on top of ag-related outreach. just to try to reach farmers where they are. So I did a statewide needs assessment that I wanted to just share some of the results from with ag professionals who work with farmers across the state, and then also with farmers. And these were some of the most common questions that we got, and they were things that probably don't surprise you, but farmers were wondering about personal recommendations for foresters and loggers. And I think the forestry assistance locator is a great place to point folks to. Economic opportunities, again, is one thing that I'm really interested in as far as income diversification. We've got forest product specialists who help provide some market information as far as timber prices, but then there's a lot of different opportunities, whether that's leasing or looking into some of those non-timber forest products too, to add some diversification to farming operations. A lot of farmers were asking about cost share programs, of which you guys are a lot of you are the experts on. And then that forest health piece, I think, is one kind of broad category that I'd like to kind of expand on and link that forest health to some of these other ecosystem services that are important to farmers. And then the last piece was kind of the tax help. And I think it's kind of important to remember that farmers are in a little different place with their woodlands as far as the tax situation is concerned, because the MFL program doesn't really offer a major incentive on the tax front, and that's kind of the DNR's flagship program for promoting forest management and forest health that impacts some of these downstream water quality impacts. Okay, so the last piece, kind of what I'm trying to do again is to link up, meet farmers where they are with messages that make sense to them around forestry management, extend that conservation ethic that I think is really thriving within the state of Wisconsin, extend that ethic beyond the field edge. And then I think also forestry also offers a unique opportunity for intergenerational connections. And I think there's kind of that long time frame management scale that we can kind of look at to connect this intergenerational piece. And with the land tenure and turnover that we've been seeing, it's, I think, a really, really important thing for us to focus on in future outreach. So those are some of the areas that I'm working on. But I guess with the last minute here, kind of my takeaways from today is that, what I want to do is help landowners find the values in their woods. And I think that water quality is really that essential underpinning, and has builds the support for healthy forests and riparian buffers, right? So that's kind of, I think there's a lot of momentum in that space, and we need to continue to build on that. But then, when we're talking about those water quality benefits, I think we can, bring in some of these other values for landowners to consider, whether that's economic, recreational, or conservation related. Second takeaway is, connect with us at Extension Forestry. We want to be a resource for you. You can refer folks to me. We got our email here, and then I'm going to be sharing business cards. I got to do a reprinting, and I'll share those with county offices across the state. So, if you've got a question and you don't know where to send people, Extension is a great place to send them. So yeah, my phone is always on, and inbox is open to get in touch with me. And, we want to be a resource for you in helping to serve farmer woodland owners. And then the last piece, which it seems like most of you are already in tune with, is connecting with the DNR service foresters and the tax law foresters in your area, and really trying to provide a holistic effort. We're in this together to promote conservation and serve Wisconsin landowners. And I think there's, a lot of opportunities for us to work together. All right, so that went really fast. I'd be happy to take comments or questions in the last minute or two. But again, yeah, please provide me your feedback, and then I've got this last slide to share as well. So I'll turn it over to Kyle.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it. Great presentation. There are quite a few questions in the chat. If it's okay with you, we do have a little extra time. If we could take maybe 5 more minutes of your time and go till about 3:05 with a few questions, that would be great. If that works for you.
Yeah, I'm happy to stick around, and I can hang out too later and maybe answer some questions in the chat and respond to individual stuff too. So happy to hang out.
That sounds great. All right. So the first question I have is, do you see an increased farmer interest in woodland habitat management with the big increase in farmers marketing hunting leases?
Yeah, I think that's really regionally specific. I think there's certain geographic areas in the state that are, kind of destinations for folks getting hunting leases, or farmers selling access for hunting rights. So in the Southeast, I think there's room to, there's not a lot of that going on. I think in the Southwest, there's more, but I think it's a really important opportunity to add some value to woodlands for farmers. There's some issues with liability and leases, which are, important considerations for farmers to, take in before they start, exchanging money for access. But yeah, it hasn't been a big area of excitement in my part of the state, but I think there will be continue kind of pressure for that access moving forward.
Great. The next question I have is, what do you see the state providing for buffering wetlands that are forested by not allowing trees to be removed in wetlands and on lands surrounding wetlands? Are you seeing county zoning regulations playing a role in this by restricting the number of trees that can be removed in a wetland district?
Yeah, that's a great question. I am not involved at the granular scale to know the kind of county ordinance layer and how that impacts some of this. But it is challenging. I think there are a lot of issues with timber harvesting in those riparian areas, and there might be opportunities for selective times during the year to go in, and maybe there's some education around that needs to be brought to policymakers as far as some of these best management practices and how we can actually safely harvest some of those trees. I think some of the emphasis needs to go to some of these non-timber forest products potentially in those areas that are not requiring that harvest piece, and kind of looking at alternative economic opportunities.
Great. Another question I have is, do you see a threat endangered species concerns with temporary fences to help with forest regeneration having a negative effect on those species, such as bats and wood turtles? What is an ideal acre size for an exclusion area for forest regeneration?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question too. Just because of the expense, I see a lot of exclosure fencing as kind of cost prohibitive for landowners who are really, focused on kind of forest management. You see a lot in kind of tree farming type situations, maybe protecting nursery trees and that kind of thing. But I think it is definitely cost prohibitive. I think that it is definitely a concern with endangered species, but I'm not seeing a lot of wide scale fencing for the, kind of the forest regeneration, with forest regeneration in mind. One opportunity that I think I briefly mentioned are the slash wall exclosures. Cornell has been doing some research on using slash from forestry or else invasive species management to create barriers in your woods that are more kind of natural brush piles that can exclude deer from certain areas. Obviously, you're going to need quite a bit of slash to do that type of a system. If you just Google Cornell slash walls, there's some good videos and research around that. But I could imagine, a practice like that having just being more natural, having less of an impact on endangered species.
Great. And then one more I got for you quickly is kind of the $1 million question, spinning off of our carbon discussions from earlier this morning and our climate resilience discussions, is, will there be carbon credits for already existing county forests? I don't know if you can speak to that at all.
Yeah, that's a rapidly evolving landscape. There are several programs that are piloting around the country. There is some work that's being done in northern Wisconsin right now around setting up some pilot sites around specific forest communities. So right now there's not kind of a big opportunity for counties to get involved or private landowners to get involved unless they meet those very kind of specific test requirements. So they've got the minimum acreage of a specific type of forest in a specific geographic zone. So right now, I think most of it is just kind of speculative, and they're trialing out some of these programs to see, you know, how effective they are at actually sequestering carbon, measuring that, and then, you know, seeing what kind of buy-in they have from partners. So I think near term, I wouldn't be holding my breath on getting enrolled in one of these programs, but I think it is, you know, another opportunity, you know, to kind of add some value to those woodlands. And yeah, get in touch with your local extension agent, and we'll kind of follow that conversation together.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Tony, and thanks, Kyle, for helping out with the questions. Really appreciate an engaging session there. And we will take a short break. Let me check and see what time we're coming back, but I believe it is 3:15. Yes, we will see you all at 3:15.